What up, fools, and welcome back to another episode of The Current. And today we're going to talk about my thoughts on whether or not the city of Greenville exists exclusively to serve and cater to East Carolina University or the other way around. We're also going to discuss the $4.5 million that was allocated in the state budget for the Pitt-Greenville Airport. And we're going to chat about the incident with the Pitt County Sheriff's Office and Chili, the dog. When tragedy happens, what should justice actually look like? And we're going to argue at the end of the episode about whether or not the city of Greenville should develop a portion of the town common and construct a cafe there. We're going to talk about all those things, and we're going to start with ECU and the city of Greenville. And I posted a TikTok several days ago. I was in Cary at a property called Fenton, which is a multi-use development corporate structure where there is residential housing, there's bars, restaurants, offices, and other retail stores, and then a common courtyard space. And I essentially asked the question, why do we not have this in Greenville? And the responses are always interesting because some people are genuinely helpful, and then some guy was like, I've heard rumors that private investors do calculations on their ROI, and that's how they determine what they want to build. Which, thank you. Like, that actually never occurred to me. I really appreciate that feedback. Obviously, I'm aware of that. My question is, why are we being overlooked by private investors as the city of Greenville? I'm very aware also that Cary has wildly different demographics than the city of Greenville. But there are pockets of the county that have higher median household incomes. The town of Winterville, for example, the household median income is $83,000 a year. Cary's is like $130 and some change. And the average for the county household income is around $90,000. Our demographics are actually very comparable to College Station, Texas. The size of our population, the percentage of the people living in poverty, and the median household income. Now, obviously, Texas A&M is exponentially larger than ECU, but you could argue that that would make some of their private equity development worse because they have a bunch more students than we do. I don't feel like just solely the demographics are reason enough for us to not be on the radar for those kinds of projects. Obviously not to the same scale as Cary, because we don't have, on average, the amount of expendable or disposable income. We don't have the same population, but something to that effect where you have mixed use development and common area space, I think would absolutely crush it. I started a little segment on Instagram where I did If I Was in Charge, and the first one was, if I was in charge, I would build a roadway between the intersection of Park Drive and 10th Street, which is right there at the Walmart on 10th Street, to where you could turn left and go to 264 from that intersection. Literally drive from 10th Street Walmart to 264, which the city already owns a lot of that land in between of there, and it would essentially dump you out right there beside Bradford Creek. If I was in charge, I would take the mall and demolish it all and start all the way over with mixed-use development, condos, townhouses, apartments, retail stores like Aerie, H&M, White House Black Market, World Market, a lot of these things that are retail stores that we have the population and the income to support, but for whatever reason, we just can't attract. You do a common courtyard area, I think it would be even cooler. You put a hotel in there, you put a indoor venue so that you can start attracting things like comedy shows and plays and things of that nature. You put it all right there. That is a fantastic location for that. You've got Publix across the street. People that live in that development could walk back and forth to the grocery store. It's walkable distance to the campus. There's so much potential there. And I think that's part of what frustrates me about city planning, is the one that I obviously am not a city planner, so I don't have some of the ins and outs of all of the ways that things have to work together. I know enough probably to get myself in trouble, but for me, who's a very logical person, like, hey, I just don't understand why we can't do this. What can we do to attract this kind of development? And obviously, this exercise of if I was in charge is built on if there was an unrestricted amount of funds and no rules for the development. This is just what I would do. That kind of concept is needed and desired within the city of Greenville. The other kind of theme to the comments in that post was so many people were trashing Greenville as like the redheaded stepchild of Eastern North Carolina. And we are here solely because of ECU, and that is our purpose, to cater to and provide for the college. You can't have anything nice because the college kids ruin it. I personally disagree with that. Are there corridors of town that are reserved for college kids? Yes. But this idea that there's no one in Greenville for any reason other than to participate in the university is objectively false. And I know that it's false because I sell houses to these people who are not affiliated with ECU in any way every single day. Every single day, I sell houses to people that relocate here from all over the country to go to work for one of the many very large corporations that we have here in Pitt County. I sell houses to families that were either born here or they went to school here and they stayed here. Elderly people that are moving closer into Greenville from more rural parts of the eastern part of the state in order to be closer to healthcare. People that move here to be closer to their children and their grandchildren. There is an entire network of industry and consumers that are not affiliated with the college. And at some point, we have to, as a city and as a group of people, decide that we're going to move away from being a college town to being a town with a college. And some of the dreams that we have for commercial development should serve the idea that we are a town with a college. There are things here beyond just ECU. Now, there's some nuance to this, and I know that the internet is where nuance goes to die. Stupid people hate nuance. It requires a certain level of intellect to be able to understand that two things can be true at the same time, and that this is not a clear-cut black and white thing. Obviously, ECU is a pillar of our community and our economy. There is a lot of things that we need ECU to turn the wheel for. That does not mean that we should just ignore all of these other people and the fact that Greenville is a city by itself. This should be a symbiotic relationship. I know that we lose enrollment to Chapel Hill and NC State because they have more to offer in terms of commercialization and community. The city and ECU have to work together to be able to drum those things up. We also have a major problem with essentially being a factory of college graduates because they come here, they get a degree, and then they leave because there's nothing keeping them here. And we should be capitalizing on the fact that we're attracting people from all over the country to go to school here. We should be able to retain some of that enrollment, more of the enrollment that we are right now. There are things that Greenville deserves, and one of those things is additional third spaces in retail. And I got an opportunity to chat with Sean Hendricks, who is one of the owners at Fellowship Games, and he gave us an inside tour of what they've got going on over here, and it is extremely impressive. I don't think that I've ever seen anything quite like it, but he's a super interesting dude, and I think we're probably going to chat with him more in depth at some point. So here's a quick preview of our conversation about Fellowship Games.
We pair people with board games. I'll ask you some questions of what you like, and I'll help point you, and then our staff actually teaches you to play the game.
Oh, that's kind of cool. That's actually really neat because I would not have any idea.
Well, a lot of people buy board games, they get them home, they sit in a wrapper, they open up the manual, and they look at it, and they're like, I can't do this. It's because it's confusing in the manual, but then I show you at the tabletop, and in 5 minutes, you know how to play the game.
All right, so that was a quick preview. There is a full 10-minute version that will be out next week, and you'll be able to see that on our YouTube channel. In recent news, Pitt-Greenville Airport was granted a $4.5 million grant in the North Carolina state budget when we passed that right after 4th of July. There's a lot of commentary in regard to that online. And I want to just kind of learn y'all something about what this is meant to do for the airport. I know there was some commentary about the airport receiving $12 million worth of funds in the midst of COVID. And I want to be clear that that was a part of the CARES Act. That was federal money that was distributed to airports and airlines all over the country in order to keep them afloat. That was disaster relief money in order to pay utilities and pay employees and keep things moving along so that thousands of airports across the country didn't just shut down. In addition to that, in 2021, the state gave Pitt-Greenville Airport $2 million for capital improvements, which is your infrastructure. This $4.5 million is being divulged to Pitt-Greenville Airport in conjunction with some other private investment money in order to attract an additional airline for Pitt-Greenville. Now, there is some chatter about whether or not it is specifically an additional airline or whether or not it is an extended service through American. Now, I've heard both. I don't know exactly what the plan is, but based off of the best of my information and understanding, it is the intent to pursue the recruitment of an additional airline. Well, why do we need $4.5 or $5 million to do that? Because these big corporations and airlines essentially want Pitt-Greenville Airport to guarantee them a certain amount of revenue. So in order to recruit an additional airline like United or JetBlue or whoever it is that it may be, we have to be able to guarantee that they're going to generate a certain amount of funds, even if they don't actually meet the ticket sales. So all of this money is essentially set aside to say, hey, if you don't sell enough plane tickets in order to meet this number, whatever that agreed on number is, we will give you the difference. The idea in attracting an additional airline is that you get additional connecting flights to different cities, and you force American to get their act together and to not do whatever it is they're doing right now, because anybody that has flown out of Greenville knows that that is a complete nightmare, and it's not always worth it. Sometimes it's just easier to go to Raleigh. So if we attract another airline, hopefully it will create some healthy competition. One of the biggest complaints years and years ago was everybody had a huge bone to pick with Suddenlink, because Suddenlink, which is now Optimum, was our only internet provider for the city. When we brought in, MetroNet, now we don't have a problem with internet, because you don't have a monopoly. You've got two different people providing service. And so now they have to do a good job or else they lose customers to the other provider. So what kind of connecting flights are we looking at? Again, there's not anything set in stone, and I'm just telling y'all what I've heard on radio chatter. There is a lot of conversation about Dulles being included in some of the connecting flights. I think there's preference to get Reagan in and out of DC just because it's a little bit nicer of an airport. There is also conversation about Chicago, LaGuardia, and Florida. Lots of people have asked about Atlanta. I'm telling you, I have not heard anything about Atlanta. I don't think that that's on anybody's radar or in the plan to try to attract that as a connecting flight. And you guys also, have to keep in mind that things like this that are being done are laying the groundwork for the very long-term vision of the county. I have harped and harped on the megasite, but it is such a big deal, and there are so many moving pieces that are being coordinated in order to make sure that we have a good platform to launch this megasite and for it to really be successful. And this effort in attracting an additional airline is part of that, because we're talking about bringing in Fortune 500, Fortune Global 500 companies to have locations in Greenville. And if we don't have air travel into some of these bigger hubs, it's not going to work. That does not work. There are a couple of other things, missing pieces that the city doesn't have currently that we need to be able to provide in order to attract these kind of companies. And those things are happening in the background also. And while it does benefit residents, let's be very clear, y'all. This is not being done for y'all. This is not being done so that Emily McAllister can hop on a flight from Greenville to LaGuardia and go to New York for the weekend. That is not why. They are doing it because there is a bigger picture. There is something more at play here. And this has to be done in order to move in that direction so that the megasite can be successful. Okay, speaking of bigger things at play, we're going to venture into the well with this next segment. And the question that I'm proposing is, when tragedy happens, what should justice accomplish? There are several things floating around in the headlines and on social media right now that are getting a lot of attention, some of which are national and one of which is local. You've got the Lindsay Clancy trial going on, which I'm going to give you a very brief synopsis of some of these things in case you're not familiar. So Lindsay Clancy is accused of murdering her 3 small children in Massachusetts in early 2023. Her defense is that she is criminally insane. She reached out for months and months trying to get psychiatric help. There is a lot of belief that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis. And should she be held criminally liable? That's a very polarizing topic online. Then you've got Emily Kaiser, who last May, her son fell in the pool and drowned. Her husband was the only one home at the time. He knew the child was in the backyard. He was not watching the child. And now there's been some fresh developments with that, which they were in the background of a video with their younger son on a boat with no life jacket. There's a lot of uproar about that online. You know, whether or not they should be held criminally liable, should they be canceled, whatever. And then locally, you've got Chili the dog, who was left in the back of a Pitt County Sheriff's vehicle for approximately 4 hours, forgotten about, and ultimately died. All of these things are profound tragedies. Horrible, horrible, just very uncomfortable situations. Do I think that Lindsay Clancy and Emily and Brady Kaiser are cold, calculated people who, you know, Lindsay Clancy, I don't think for months faked some psychiatric break and breakdown in order to have some sort of alibi for killing her 3 children? No, I don't think that. Do I think that Brady, Kaiser, and Emily collectively decided that they were going to purposefully create circumstances under which their child would die? No, I don't think that. Do I think that the handler for the Pitt County Sheriff's Office purposely left that dog in the back seat of that of the patrol car? No, I don't. I think these are all very tragic incidences. When we're seeing some of this discourse online about, well, this should be done and this should be done and they should go to jail and blah, 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 I think that's a lot of anger, and it's a lot of people's own inability to recognize something that, while it may be very uncomfortable, like nothing can be done to rectify these circumstances. Nothing can be done to fix it. Even if all of these people go to jail, even if all of these people lose their jobs, lose their livelihood, just retreat from society wholly, never to be seen or heard from again, what does that really accomplish? Like, what good does that do for the betterment of them as individuals, for our culture as a whole? Does it really make a difference? And, you know, that's not to say, obviously, that some mistakes just can't be made. If you have a canine dog, which I also want to provide some more context here, this handler had taken this dog to a training for canine handlers that morning, had returned back to the county at around 12 o'clock during the day, and left the dog in the car, forgot the dog. I think part of people's frustration with this is that this happened in the beginning of June, and we're really only just now hearing about it. It took the sheriff's office quite a while to disclose that information to the public, which I also have a problem with, but that's a separate issue. I don't think it's beneficial for people to, dox this guy online. I'm not going to give his name because what does that help? What does that really accomplish? Again, some mistakes just can't be made. You just can't make mistakes like, oh, I forgot the dog in the car. You just can't make mistakes like, oh, my kid was outside in the backyard for 10 minutes and I didn't check on him, and we have a pool with no net and no gate. Some mistakes just can't be made, but what is the solution here? And I don't have a proposed solution, because I'm just looking at all three of these things going, God, this is horrible. And I bet all of these people affiliated with all three of these instances probably feel so disgusted with themselves and carry an immense amount of shame and grief for their own mistakes and stupidity. Does that serve as enough punishment? Their own internal hell? I don't know. I really don't have a good answer to that question. This is the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night. Like, some of these things have really, really bothered me. What would make us sleep better at night knowing, that these people have been held accountable? What does being held accountable look like? I also think people tend to forget that you are not owed by strangers or anyone accountability or a public apology. That's not your place. You can't browbeat that out of people. And for whatever reason, as a society, we have leaked more and more in that direction of, oh, well, we can just bully people into giving us what we want. You actually can't. You can't control what other people do. All around, those three things are just very bothersome, very uncomfortable, because they're not clean cut. There is clear fault, but there's no clear malice. And I think that's what people struggle with. I don't have a clear answer or solution for that, but I do have a solution in this next segment. Let's argue, should the city of Greenville build the cafe at the town commons? Lots of very interesting discourse about this particular subject. And I want to give you just a piece of history that I came across in a meeting last week, the week before maybe, that I thought was very interesting, which is that part of the reason that there is no development throughout our town common area currently is because in the early 80s, Greenville accepted from the Land and Water Conservation Fund a $50,000 grant to maintain and to keep the town common area undeveloped. And so I guess there was maybe some chatter or discussion about developing town common and building the amphitheater and this cafe concept and whatever in a different location on town common several years ago, and it got shut down because it was discovered, oh, we can't develop any of this land unless we go through this federal process to recategorize this parcel. So it's kind of crazy to think about. For $50,000 in the early 80s, the city of Greenville gave up the ability to develop that particular parcel. But there is a small section or small parcel adjacent to the larger town commons area that is not encumbered by that agreement. And it is there. It's kind of like if you go up to the boat ramp, that section kind of directly to the left, that's right there on the water. It's in that spot that the city is asking for public input on whether or not they should construct some sort of cafe concept. And they've released these renderings that it's like this, it's very industrial looking, and they're shipping containers that are upfitted to be kind of like a concession style setup with outdoor picnic tables and things like that. Now, obviously, you're always going to have people that are like, we don't need to develop anything here at all, just leave it grass. I don't necessarily agree with that. I did see one comment where someone said that they wanted the city to develop the opposite side of First Street. The city actually does own that land because I looked at it. There's something way back there, like some sort of something, mechanical something. I don't know if that would prevent them from developing that. I think that would be an interesting concept, and I can just go ahead and tell you that the challenges to that is going to be funds, because they would have to construct an additional bulkhead, backfill all of that space, get it to where you can actually construct something there. And there's always the concern about flooding Everybody knows that if we get a bunch of rain or we have a tropical depression through here, that section of the river is going to swell. And so if you're going to build that kind of commercial development, now you're talking about doing a very high bulkhead because you got to get it out of the 100, 500 year floodplain, whatever it may be. I think also with that same concept, it would be a huge deterrent for people to have to drive all the way down First Street, take a right on that on the bridge, and then take another right and come all the way back up. There would have to be some sort of construction for a pedestrian bridge where you could walk from the north side of the river to the south side of the river. You got to be able to connect it by foot, or else it's not going to work. People are incredibly lazy and they take the path of least resistance, and it's part of the reason why walkability. I hate to use the term 15-minute city, but I mean, that is essentially what it is. It's about convenience. How can we cram as much of what people want to patron in the smallest footprint so that it's easily accessible as possible? Because gone are the days where people, seek out specific locations and specific boroughs for something in particular. My personal thought on this is, yes, it should be developed. Should they put a city-run cafe there? No, absolutely not. I don't like the idea of the city of Greenville staffing, employing, cooking, whatever. I don't like that. I love public-private partnerships because it's a way for the city to generate alternative means of revenue, which in turn provide all of the residents with more resources, more fire and EMS, more parks, all those things without raising your property taxes. But I don't think that's the way to go about it. I would love to see a pavilion that is concrete at the bottom with food truck bays where food trucks can pull up. They can hook up to power if need be. And there's, common seating, significantly less cost for the city to develop. It's significantly less maintenance. It doesn't require any sort of really additional employees. Your grounds people are going to maintain the grass around it and keep it pressure washed and all that kind of stuff. You have the ability to generate additional revenue by leasing those spots for the food trucks to private small business owners, which is beneficial for them. It's beneficial for the city. And you have the ability to lease the pavilion itself for private events. And God forbid, if we were to get some crazy storm through here and the river overflow, you just pull everything out of there, let the water rise, let it recede, pressure wash it all, and go on about your day. I think that would be a much better option that also satisfies a lot of people are like, well, we want to be able to see the river from this. A pavilion is an relatively unobstructed view. That's my 2 cents. I reckon I need to go to one of those meetings and let everybody know that that's what I think. I'm sure they're very excited about that, to see me and to hear what I have to say. But that is all for this episode. Join us 2 Fridays from now for the next go round, and I'll see you guys soon.